everybody who can join us today live. We're going to be recording the session. So thanks, Anita, for starting the recording. And let's get started with the readout. So this time, we're going to be talking about the results for the 2020 Apache Software Foundation Community Survey. This is a research that took place last year and part of this year. Next slide, please. So in this slide, you can see who was the team who led the research. We start with Anita Sarma from the Oregon State University, Daniel Izquierdo from Vitergia, Mariam Gizani from the Oregon State University as well, and Georg Link from Vitergia, and myself, Chris Cuevas, the VP of Diversity and Inclusion for the ASF. Just to also recognize people who were heavily involved in the survey and all the other research that has been happening on diversity and inclusion. We want to give a big shout out to Katia Rojas, Justin McLean, and Ken Knowles, who have been involved in one way or the other and have been very supportive of this initiative. And we also want to thank all the ASF community who take the time to provide input, to ask questions, and to help us ship this off the door. Next slide, please. So just to set the context on what motivated this survey. So last year, on May last year, the D&I committee was approved by the board of the ASF. And short after, during the first 2 months, we work on defining a set of values and a set of goals and objectives for the committee. So the short term and the medium term were mainly focused on gathering scientific data that will help us understand what is the baseline of our community and what can we do to raise awareness about the importance of diversity and inclusion, as well as find key indicators that can help us measure progress through time. So with these motivations in mind and because of these goals, we work in first, having a research, scientific research first. So if we go to the next slide, please. So, well, this is a timeline of how the efforts of diversity and inclusion have been happening in the ASF. So as I mentioned, in May last year, the committee got created. Then the committee's goals were defined finally at the end of July last year. And those were the goals that I shared previously. And the community survey project kicked off at the end of October last year. So from October until early December, we work on drafting questions, getting a feedback from the community, and defining a final set of questions. Next slide, please. And well, just to finalize the timeline, we opened the survey in December last year, and it was open until January this year. And we received the surveys from both community members, committers, and just contributors who are not yet committers on Apache projects. Next slide, please. So with no further ado, I'm gonna pass it on to Anita and Daniel, who are gonna be telling us about the survey and how we went about designing it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Chris, for the introduction. So, well, these are some of the existing resources that we've been using, of course, to feed
right. So let me jump in a little bit. Since Chris had given us the mandate that there should be a scientific research, what we wanted to do was we looked at all the other surveys about D&I that had been done by other communities to understand what set of questions we should ask the ASF community. So that's why we leveraged these questions heavily from the 2016 ASF Committer Diversity Survey, but also adding CHAOS, the D&I working group has a bunch of good guidelines, so we kind of worked off those two. So coming up with a combined set that we hope picked up the best from the existing community resources.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so moving to the next slide. Well, some methodology and tools some considerations. We were asked not to spend more than 20 minutes in each of the surveys, with no perhaps up to 25 questions approximately. We decided to go through the emails to committers and diversity and inclusion mailing lists, social networks. We even had the opportunity to have a booth at FOSDEM, where we were talking to those coming to the booth about the survey, etc., etc. So these are just some general considerations to bring some more context here. The survey we will publish the survey in Jira at the ASF Jira. So all of this is going to be public, not the data, but the questions and the answers. So this can be reproduced during the next year. So we'll try to have this as complete as possible. Some internal process with discussions and so on. You can see that at the end of October, mid-November is where all of this happened. So thank you once again to all of the community that helped a lot, bringing new point of view, ideas, and comments. Challenges, I won't go through them. I think it's more interesting if we start the discussion about the data and so on. Just a quick comment: when we have less than certain percentage of people in some of the data sets, then we are aggregating those. So for instance, for just an example, for gender, we are aggregating the gender of those that didn't answer or self-identify as man or woman, because those percentages were too small in some cases, but it happens as well with education and some other areas. So this is the highlight here I would like to share with you. In terms of reproducibility, well, as I mentioned before, we have this in the Apache Confluence and Jira, where we have the tickets, etc. So the idea is, well, we can have this again in the future if needed. So data collection, Chris already mentioned about this number of responses, the response rate that you can see around 8-9% of the total community of 7,000 people approximately. The timing to answer all of these, that's the surveys that were partially filled or fully filled here. So in total, we have this between 600 and 700 answers. Yeah, data analysis. So Anita, all yours.
Right. So the scoping, what we found was when we looked at the survey responses from the committers, which were the closed group, as well as the open survey, 466 from the committers that were completed, and 158 from the open survey that was fully completed. We only took the completed responses because we didn't want to get the partial responses. They were at different stages of completion. We also found that the open survey, which was basically from Twitter, social media, as well as the responses from the committers, were very, very close. They're almost identical. So we combined them together for all the data analysis. We'll move forward. This also made us think that it might be very much possible that even though we sent out an email to a committer, they might have also gotten the social media message to Twitter and taken one or the other. So I think what we have is kind of combination of both committers as for the open thing. We are doing our readout. The analysis of the survey results were really kind of the ASF goal of how can we instrument the Apache contributor funnel so that we can right now establish what's the baseline, especially for those who are in the minority. And then the next stage is like, how can we improve? So the ASF question, first we start is like, what is the state of DNI in ASF? Are people facing challenges when participating? And any association with typically underrepresented aspects like gender, English fluency, things like that. And the survey responses also help us look for interview participants. Next slide. And as I alluded, the 3 dimensions kind of are what we started looking into. And this was after kind of doing some exploratory data analysis and input from Chris. First is like the basic demographics of age, tenure, how long someone, age, the gender, English fluency, as well as the background culture. And what we mean by background culture here is those who were born in one country, but kind of moved to another country. And sometimes, Latin American culture of discussing working might be different than the, say, Western society or Americans, or Asian society might be different than the American. And these kind of discussions or decision-making processes that are different from these different cultures might be impacting challenges or contributions. So that's why we picked that up too. Socioeconomic status has been, or aspects have been found to be important in research, because, as we can see, if you don't have time, you didn't get to go to college or higher education, you have barely time to do anything with 3 jobs, you are less likely to contribute to open source. But open source development and software development is a channel for career improvement, is something that can help increase or improve socioeconomic status. So that would be something we want to see if ASF can actually help. Finally, what are the experiences of contributors in ASF with respect to how long they have been in the community? So that's tenure, whether they have had mentors when they started, and what kind of challenges or how much challenges are people facing. And I think Daniel will go, oh, I'm still going there, okay. And most of our analysis has been kind of bringing those 3 dimensions, 3 aspects in our analysis. When we look at the total data analysis from the survey, we have 2 parts. One is the demographics analysis, which is kind of trying to understand what's the baseline, like who are these people? And then we also did something for profile analysis, kind of find out who's the majority profile, like who's the archetypical person in ASF. This helped us do 2 things. One of is understand the community, but also what it helps us do is also identify those minority profiles. And these profiles will help us kind of dive deeper down into challenges that these minority profiles might be facing. And we will use that data for our next stage, which is the interview process. Next slide, please. And survey results now. So as we said, that the survey results help us find out, the majority profile, the archetypical person. And here is our average ASF contributor. He's a 40-year-old man who's confident in English, was born and lives in the USA. So this was our majority participants. They have a bachelor's degree. They are working as a volunteer for ASF with not too much time, like 1 to 2 hours of volunteering. They have been 5 years in the community. They didn't have a mentor when they started, and they are not facing any challenges, right? So this is kind of mainstream person who has made it into ASF and is doing pretty well. Next slide. And I think Daniel is going to go through next few slides looking at these dimensions and these aspects in a more broader sense.
Yeah, thank you for this, Anita. Yeah, so the idea is now to present for each of these areas of analysis for the dimensions, the different data sets that we have, what we discovered, and what people answer, right? So first of all, we have noticed that the community is getting experienced, and at the same time, community is kind of getting old. So if you check the charts, what we have is, well, most of the people are around this peak. So, and the biggest one is between 3 and 5 years, which is aligned with the mainstream profile that we discussed before. And then indeed those with experience less than 1 year, so less than 1 year of participation in the community represents approximately 10% of all of the answers. With respect to age, like the natural age of the people, of the participants in the community, it's interesting to mention that participants under 24 years old represents less than 5% of the total population. And then we have our big peak of activity of people, of responders here with between 35 and 44. So basically the question we have here, and this is part of further analysis we need to do during the interviews and perhaps during the following years, is if there are specific barriers for young people or newcomers, because we compare the different populations, it seems that, well, those with less than 1 year of experience are the smallest of all of the groups that we have in terms of tenure. And then those that are younger than 24 represents a really really a small amount of those participants in the community. So those are questions. So the question we have on our minds is if there are specific barriers. So this is something that we would like to dig a bit more. Then working on the compensation, if there's any, or volunteering time, 40% of all of the people that answer are working as volunteers. So this is why we see this big here of close to 250 responses in this case, where well they are volunteers and they are working, let's say, on their free time. On the other hand, as Anita already mentioned, like our majority profile can only spend like 1 or 2 hours in this case, or there are even people that don't have a specific time to volunteer. So then with respect to having people faster in helping and participating and enjoying with the community, we were wondering if there are specific ways to be more efficient, or if we can help those unpaid volunteers to contribute perhaps with faster onboarding processes, perhaps trying to look for specific bottlenecks, etc. So we are trying to look at those barriers for contribution. Interesting to mention that the community of the ASF, at least those that answer, around 90% of them are of those ASF contributors are college educated or higher. So that leaves as a 10% those with no college that didn't attend to a college group. So the question I have here is this related to what people learn at the college or during the degree or during the PhD or master? So they learn about open source. So then it's easier or more natural for them to move from that academic environment to a more more industrial or community oriented in the ASF in this case. So the other question then we have is if those people that are in the no college group, if they are aware of open source as a whole at the same level as those that are attending to the university or to the college. So if they are aware of OSS or at Apache Software Foundation at the same level. So this is something we would like to check as well. So more numbers. Gender distribution. In this case, this is self-assigned. You will see that we have this group of other people. Let's focus now in this pie chart on the top right. So we have 88%, 89% of people that self-identified as men. Then we have 4.6 women, and then 6.7 as other. We had different options and even an other option where people could,
right. Let me jump in here, Daniel. We had other options which were like gender variant, non-binary, things like that, and prefer to self-describe. So those we all lumped together as others, which contributed to 6.7 more than the self-identification as women percentage.
Yeah. Because that population is small in terms of percentage, we decided to aggregate them into the group of other. Mm-hmm. So we have like for this gender, then we had another question, and was if you carefully think about what gender for the 88% basically have carefully think what gender in their handles represent. So basically, if they decided to choose their handle carefully with this respect. So we have certain percentage, the biggest one here that answered no, I didn't have any careful handle selection. And then we have another percentage that answered as yes. If we compare the population and the distribution of gender with those that answered yes, with those that we can see in the top right chart, the pie chart, and that answer, those that answer no, compared to the general population, to the full data set, the numbers are exactly the same. So basically there's no difference, but there is difference if we go for those that carefully selected their handle based on gender. So we can see that when we go for 11% approximately of people that are not men in this case, then we jump up to 70, 30% approximately of people that are claim that they, well, we carefully selected our handle based on this because that matters to me. So the question we have in this case is if there are specific issues related to the non-gender neutral handle on the one hand, and if there's another a specific way that we can improve the diversity, another the percentage of people at the end coming from specific groups of women and others, because the numbers are around 11%, as we can see in the results. Something to clarify here, Anita?
Yeah, so I just wanted to not clarify, but add why we put this question in. There was a academic paper in 2019 in our software engineering conference that did a survey with just open source developers across multiple communities. And they were trying to identify D&I issues. And they had said that women in their survey tended to be careful about the handle they use because they had felt discrimination or challenges in getting their contributions accepted if their handles would kind of showcase that they were women. So they were being extra careful, trying to give neutral handles so that gender would not affect their contributions. So we wanted to see if this was also maybe the case for the ASF contributors. So that's why we put this question.
Thank you. Yeah, if we keep going, interesting to say that there are challenges. So there are definitely challenges, and approximately half of the people that answer have faced challenges when contributing to the ASF. This group from all of this full data set, then we asked them as well if they had a mentor before their first task. 62% of those contributors didn't have a mentor. So the question, of course, is how can we reduce these challenges to make this contributors path much easier? So if we think again about the time to volunteer that people have, that they are unpaid, and the careful selection of the handle, etc., etc. So there are issues in this contributors path. So how can we improve them? What are those, right? So in this survey, what we are trying to look are for certain relations, not causality, just relations. So then we'll try to go for the causality and so on during the interviews and further analysis.
Right. And one quick addition, like at least a few challenges involves 3 types of data points. One is a few challenges, several challenges, and many challenges. So that shows like 52% people have faced quite a bit of challenges. Yeah.
And then with respect to the English speaking fluency, there are certain part of the population that answer that, well, don't feel comfortable speaking English, and then some others feel that they are around the average. So around 20% of contributors feel that they have an average English level or less in this case, and language definitely seems to be a barrier for communication and for contributing to the ASF. So this is something that we would like to dig a bit more as well in this case. So now the next steps were, well, we keep having questions, of course, based on the data that we already presented. And those questions now are related to, well, so we have people that are facing challenges. So who are they? Why are they facing challenges? Are there more women or they are more men? If we have men, why are this specific segmentation of the population having those challenges? What happened with education, with the cultural background, etc., etc. So these are now the next set of questions.
Right. So the questions kind of made us think like, okay, maybe there is this interaction effects between these dimensions. So we kind of came up with this 4 top level hypotheses that we thought might be having an effect with the contributors and with specific focus on the challenges they face. So this was, we were looking through the data, working with Gris, and they're like, hey, this is an interesting question. Maybe this is the hypothesis. So now we kind of dive deeper into these 4 top level hypotheses, and we will explain each and why we build this up in the following slides. Can you go to the next slide, please?
Yeah.
So the first thing was education impacts compensation. One of the things that was interesting was, I believe it was 90%. Like, I have never seen this many contributors having college education and more as part of the contributors. Also, the amount of people that were actually paid to participate in open source or in ASF was higher than I've seen in other places. So that kind of, we wanted to look at the hypothesis, is education, basically higher ed, impacting compensation? Are these really tech workers who are going from college and participating in ASF?
And the results are basically bringing this relationship to the table. So the higher the education, the higher the well, they are likely compensated for their specific work. If you look at the three charts, we have some greens and then we have some purples, right? So the two, three bars are graduated education or undergraduate education or undergraduate degree, and then we have no college. So if we focus on the no college, we have like approximately 77% means that, well, they are unpaid only or a mix, but mostly unpaid. So we can consider that all of these people that are in the group of no college are not paid or mostly unpaid. But if we compare this 70% with undergraduate degree or graduate education, those numbers are much smaller. And then we go to the other side, to the other extreme, like I'm basically paid work only. So this dark green that we can see on the top, and then a mix, but mostly paid, where we have these numbers here with 27% for graduate education and 25% for undergraduate degree. So the question here is perhaps people that are coming with this type of education, are they willing to work as volunteer to gain experience? Are they trying to, to learn from the community, to join the ASF somehow, and then they are willing to do more work in mostly unpaid in somehow. So this is where we are right now in the data.
So our next set of hypotheses, we're kind of looking at do some of these aspects that are considered to be a minority in open source actually lead to more challenges. So all of these have been backed up by academic research, which says like those who have problems communicating very fluently in English have problems participating in discussions in open source venues. So that might be something that leads to challenges. There is a lot of research on D&I that says those who are in minority in gender identification face challenges and barriers in getting their work accepted. So we wanted to look deeper into that. And there has been research that says participating as a newcomer to open source is really, really hard. It's a huge learning curve. And having a mentor, even though it's very difficult to get, actually helps. So that's our third hypothesis to see is that having a mentor helps or doesn't help with face challenges.
Mm-hmm. So if we start with the first one, so the language, what we have is those with an average English level or less faced more challenges. So we can see this in these two bars where the percentage increases from 50%, 48 or 49 to 63. By the way, the pie chart that you see is the distribution of the population. So this means that at least confident and more. So this includes at least confident and very confident. Those are this percentage, which are a bit around 78% as far as I remember. Then we have average, which is this bar here, around 20%, and then another 10% here with uncomfortable or not confident. So the question here is, how can we lower the language barrier? Because there seems to be specifically certain barriers related to the language here. If we focus on gender, we discovered that those that self-assign as women or they are in other groups, in the group other, so basically not men, face more challenges. We have similar numbers as before. We have 50% and then 64, 65. If we go for the two other bars, again, this is the distribution. Remember that we have women plus the group of other is around 11% of the population, and then this 11% of the population is represented here. So those that claim that self-assign as women, or in the other group, we have this percentage of people that were stating, well, we faced challenges, at least a few. As Anita mentioned before, this is a few challenges or up to many challenges. So again, question here is, how can we reduce this barrier? How is gender in this case blocking this contributors path?
Right. So one of the things that when we're looking at the data, right, it's like, okay, 52% of ASF contributors face challenges. And initially, at least my viewpoint was, oh, it would be that, women and those gender minorities are going to face a lot of challenges, since that's kind of my research thread. But it was kind of surprising to see there were quite a few men who are facing challenges. So what we wanted to do was like, okay, let's take a deep dive of looking at these men who have said they have faced at least a few, like a few to many challenges, and see what in their demographics might be affecting the challenges that they face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you remember, we presented this pie chart with the gender distribution for those that said, hey, I'm facing challenges. The number of women and those that self-assign in the group of other represented a bigger number, 25 at least %. So now we are focusing on those, on the other 75%. These represent a population of 272 people. So just to clarify that we are not looking now at the whole data set, but just as a few segmentation of this data set. Interesting to say that we didn't find any main differences, and the only two main differences are these two charts that we see here in front of you. So there are certain men that don't feel that comfortable or confident speaking English, so they are a bit more around moving to the left, let's say, in the chart, and then the very confident is a bit lower, and the confident is just slightly lower in this case. And then for those, we were wondering, well, the other attributes that we were looking at, but the other that makes sense to mention here, because the other attributes are exactly the same, so they are following the same distribution as the full data set, is this one, the men who faced certain challenges but had a mentor before. So there is a small increase here in those that mention, yes, I had a mentor before my first contribution. So this is the data. In reality, we don't see really main differences for these 272 people, but just worth mentioning, perhaps the language, perhaps the mentorship activities.
So the next thing we wanted to look at, this is coming from global software development kind of research, that culture of where you grow, the way you communicate, the way you do decision making is different across different countries. So if this might be really affecting people who have worked in, who have relocated to a different culture, to kind of see if that actually has an impact on challenges. And also, are those people who have moved their country have different demographics that might be interesting to look into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then this is a subsection, and we have a population of 134 people. So this is where we had two survey questions. One was, which country are you currently residing in, and which country did you grow up in? And if there was a difference, we call them migrants, and this is that population of 134 people.
Yeah. And indeed, I think it's worth mentioning that the two countries that were attracting ASF participants in this case, or those that moved from one country to the other, were the USA and then Germany. So those are the two countries that we see that were growing, let's say, in population in that case. Yeah. So in this case, with a cultural background, so we saw that there are more women with a different cultural background than current residents. So we can see this here, that the numbers are slightly bigger for women and those that self-identified in the other group. On the other case, men is a bit smaller. this case. So, and in general, what we saw as well is that those that move from one country to the other have first higher education, as we can see here in this case, because this is the yellow, well, the bars on the left are those that moved from one country to the other, and then the others on the right are the full data set. So we can see that those with higher education are part of this 134 people, right? And then at the same time, those feel really confident with their English speaking. So so they saw as well a higher compensation. These are kind of the insights that we found in the data set.
And a caveat with that, we were just talking, Daniel and I, were like, this is probably those who went to USA or Germany for higher education, and therefore they're looking for better opportunities. So they probably did better to improve their English fluency and well, the tech jobs. So that might be affecting what we are seeing here.
Yeah, this is something that we don't know in reality, and we hope to have some more insights after the interviews and all of this process. But those are hypotheses. Yeah.
So the recap, and this is where we kind of say, okay, we had 4 hypotheses. What is it? And since these are hypotheses, I did a chi-square test for significance, and the p-value less than 0.05 would mean that the results are statistically significant. So when we say education impacts compensation, the answer is yes. There are statistically significant differences when you have higher education and you are paid to work versus lower education and not paid to work. About those in minority who face challenges, English fluency does affect challenges. We got significance. Gender, and in this case, what I did for gender was having men versus women plus others. If we do that, you do get a significance that gender impacts challenges. If we had split up into 3 groups, men, women, and other, then there was barely any significance. But I combined the other because they were all in minority versus non-minority gender, and then you do get significance. Having a mentor and having a mentor for the task towards challenges, we did not find significance. The p-value was just at 0.05, so we were just at the cusp. So what this means, like, even though we did find significance at alpha of 0.05, this does affect challenges and can be improved. Third hypothesis was men who face challenges have different demographics. We didn't find any proof of that. Those who were basically migrants, I call them, who moved the country from where they grew up, have different demographics. No. Have more challenges they face to contributing? No, based on significance tests. Recap. Next, one of the questions we had was, did you have a mentor when you made your first task? And some of those wrote, like, I haven't made a contribution yet. And there were 18 people. And since one of the ASF mandates was, kind of find the top 3 or 4 barriers that are challenging for contributing to ASF, what we wanted to do was kind of delve deeper into this population of 18, that really small number of people. But we were kind of trying to see what kind of aspects or barriers are these newcomers facing. And the answers, that is, the questions from this part of the data helps us kind of frame the interview questions that they'll have in the next stage. Okay.
Yeah, so it was indeed interesting to see these people that claim, well, I have not contributed yet to the ASF. So then we were interested in understanding, well, these are newcomers, and then why they have not contributed yet, or what are the barriers that are preventing them to proceed, right? So we've seen that a higher percentage of them have faced certain challenges. We don't have all of the charts here, so basically there is a chart in this case that says, well, we have it's a higher percentage in this case. Then it seems that there are more women in this percentage. So the question we have is if a gender is a factor for this. We saw in the previous results that may affect some of this, and then the language as well might be another barrier, as we can see here, because they are not that confident. Although we have here more people confident. Again, the yellow bar, the bar on the left, is for those that are not confident. Again, the data set here is only 18 people if we compare to the 700 kind of number of answers we had. So they are not that comparable, but really interesting to get insights from them. Then what we saw is that most of them are volunteering with no compensation. And then interesting to see that newcomers, they have a higher education if compared to the full data set. So they are more graduate level, well, graduate or more, let's say, level in this case. And then there are less number of people undergraduate or in the no college group of answers.
Right. So maybe I found this little interesting, and not sure why this happened. So the no college itself is very small, but so if you look at the angle, the yellows and the blues have a similar slope. So the distribution are the same. So so I feel like open source, especially ASL, is probably not reaching out very well to the no college population. So this is like, it's not that the newcomers were no college and they all like got left out. It's just, even for newcomers, the slope is exactly the same as for the regular contributors, which means that there is probably not enough exposure of the no college people to open source. Because I was expecting maybe it would be like the big spike for no college and they are facing a lot of challenges and they're dropping out, but that doesn't seem to be the case.
Yeah, so this is something definitely that might be worth having a look at, and why there are a few no college people, and this might be a matter of awareness, but still we don't know, so something to keep researching. So next steps. Anita, you want to go or I go?
Sure. So our next step is we have certain hypotheses we have, and all our data is correlation because they are survey responses. They do not answer causation. So we want to know the whys behind the data we found. So we wanted to do interviews, and we have basically created our interview identification based on those profiles we have talked about earlier. Mostly we are looking at to talk to people who are in the minority related to gender, culture, and English fluency. We also are going to interview people who are the men who face challenges, few people from the average profile or the mainstream profile, which were the archetypical profile we talked about, as well as people who have not faced any challenges. In between these, we also have people who were mentors to kind of understand what their perspective is. And this will be about 20 or 15 interviews we're hoping to do in the top level, and another 10 interviews with groups of interest, those who are newcomers, basically those who are interns, either from Outreachy or other places. And more importantly, we want to talk to people who left. The challenges were too great that they could not make it. So we want to understand what those barriers were in that last group of people. And we are kind of reaching out to people already. We have 5 interviews scheduled so far.
And then with respect to the quantitative analysis, we are still in the process of selecting the final projects to analyze. Those projects are coming from a list of projects that were specified by those answering the surveys. And what the idea here is to produce a dashboard with gender information. This is going to be like a massive analysis with the goal of bringing some open discussion about having gender data for those contributors and contributions that are going into all of these projects. So we are talking around the hundreds or maybe thousands of developers and same level of commits as well, or issues, pull requests, etc., etc. There are, of course, some limitations if we go massive in this case, because gender analysis is based on API. So we have some binary gender analysis, which is, of course, very limited. But the idea is to have certain box that we can open and then start discussion. So then we have the surveys, interviews, etc., etc.
Right. So one of the reasons why we actually wanted to do this multi-pronged analysis was the survey data is very much self-selection, right? Those who either, like Yelp reviews, those who either really care about it or really hate it have a tendency to talk. So the percentage of gender that we have, or the distribution of gender and other demographics we have, really have this self-selection bias problems. That's why we wanted to do the quantitative analysis to see what's the state of affairs on the ground, right, from the committers and their information. And the interview kind of goes from the survey, and initially it was also to kind of come from the quantitative analysis, maybe to kind of fine tune on the hypothesis or the whys of certain things that are happening.
Yeah. So
very good. Sorry, go ahead, Daniel.
Oh, no, yes. I was gonna say, Chris, it's your turn.
Perfect then. So I just wanted to say thank you so much, Anita and Danielle, for walking us through this first phase of the analysis. And we have about 9 minutes, and I saw that we have some people on the call. So I want to see if they have questions so we can use this time to address them.
Marvin has raised a hand, so he has a question. So go ahead.
Hi, my name is Marvin Humphrey, and I wanted to first of all offer my gratitude for the collective work that I see here. I have been almost totally inactive in the ASF since 2017, but I used to be very active. I was past VP of the incubator, on served on the board, et cetera, et cetera. And we used to discuss issues of diversity and inclusion back then, and we did not have the benefit of this kind of data and this kind of analysis. And wow, it's overwhelming to see this so well presented and so well thought through. And I listened to this, and I have not closely followed your work, because I haven't been, although I did subscribe to the email list a couple of months ago. And so now I've basically gone from not having the benefit of any of that to being able to see this presentation today, and it is just fantastic. Having participated in discussions beforehand and not having had the benefit of this, that it was, it greatly impeded our ability to have those discussions intelligently, and impeded. We got stuck in all kinds of places. For example, we didn't even know what the proportion of demographic percentages. We had none. Back in, I think it was probably about 2014, we were discussing the percentage of women within the membership of the ASF. And I resorted to doing my own research, where I actually looked at people's LinkedIn profiles. I looked at all 600 members and tried to identify who presented as female and who presented as male. And that is problematic from a number of standpoints. It doesn't give people it's not something you can publish. Having this kind of data, which is all out there already, is, if I had had that, I wouldn't have had to do that, and it would have been so much better. Oh, well, so thank you very much for that. Okay, so having said that, a couple of notes and a couple of questions. So one thing that struck me, it was interesting to note the total, the proportion of people who were doing paid versus unpaid work. I also thought, what would be the total proportion of hours contributed by paid versus unpaid? My perception is that among the most active members, the vast majority fall into the mostly paid category. And so this impacts things such as who are the most who are the dominant contributors within within projects, and who are the most often heard voices within administration. So we have a bit of a self-reinforcing aspect of that, where the people who are already paid to do this, who have come that way. So that was the one piece of data that I thought I would have liked to have seen in there. I don't know how you actually tackle that, but do you have any insight into that? Any thoughts about that?
I can take a pass at answering, and then Anita, you can just help us with the research side. So Marvin, what we did is like Anita actually proposed this, to have a question about the number of hours that somebody can volunteer on a week, I think, and that was to give us a good proxy to understand volunteering as a privilege in a way, right? Like if you are not making, like days end or like earning enough, you're gonna have less and less time to volunteer, as well as other factors like if you are a caregiver for your family, either for child or elderly people or sick people, that minimizes your ability to volunteer. So we try to get a proxy to that specific question that you have through this question, as well as what is the type, like why do you mainly contribute to open source? Is it because you are like volunteer, partially paid, or paid by your employer? I think what you're asking is a little bit more like, do we have a number of how many hours are or how many contributions are made by the people who are paid? And I don't know if we can do that, and that's why I'm gonna let Anita and Daniel answer, because they have insight into the quantitative analysis in the survey.
So I think, so when we asked, you're right, Grace, when we asked number of hours you have, we were trying to see, do you have the privilege of extra free time to contribute? So we cannot go from paid to how much free time you have, because if they are paid, they might not have free time because they're taking care of their kids, but they're getting paid, right? So that's not, that I cannot make a connection to if you're paid, you are the dominant voice, which is probably happening. But we have another piece of data, which is what is the role you have in ASF. And maybe if you look at the paid people and the roles at higher levels, that can be something that gives me a sense of the dominant voices being the paid people. So I think that's one thing I will look into it. The other thing that I want to focus on in the interviews, because one of the open-ended questions was the challenges you face. And one answer that really stuck in my head, I mean, I don't remember everything, was this person said she's thinking of quitting ASF and not participating anymore, because those who were vendors and third-party software developers, basically the paid people, only they were making decision-making, and whatever this person was trying to contribute about design and future was not being heard of, because the paid people were completely taking over the communication. So she felt like her contributions were not valued, and she was kind of thinking of quitting. So this is an example, which is just an example, which does say that the dominant voices might be those who are being paid, and they might be kind of overshadowing the other more volunteer voices.
So just to add here as another perhaps idea for the future and for the quantitative analysis is at the same time that we can run this analysis, or the massive analysis, let's say, for gender based on the API, and then try to manually improve them. Then we can, similarly as you did, Marvin, for instance, then we can do a similar approach for those being heard in the community, at least from the communication channels perspective. So for instance, mailing list and so on, and try to look their specific affiliation. So then we can see, for instance, those that are mainly heard in the community, those that have certain voice are already paid by, for instance, a company, an organization, or non-profit, or with commercial interest. So that's something we can definitely try to do. So under discussion with you, Chris, and others. I wanted to say that. Did we answer the question?
Oh yes, that's lots of interesting information on that. Let's see, do we have time for a second? I think it looks like we're all about out of time, and so to wrap up. But in any case, I'll just ask, and maybe we'll get something. The insights about mentoring comported with my experience. My perception is that the ASF is very confusing. It makes sense that people would have challenges getting work accepted. That comports with my experience in the incubator. I know that you folks have a mentoring program that is currently active. How has that made a difference for the people that are participating in it?
So just to give you a little bit of context, like the project for mentoring that we have active is outreachy, and something that we're doing there is we're actually measuring that experience as well. So we created something called a friction log, in which we're asking both mentors and mentees to record challenges, best practices, lessons learned, so we can understand how the relationship can be improved, to your point of like being a little bit on unstructured and kind of hard to navigate. So we're hoping to get more insights from those friction logs. In the meantime, Anita, if you want to take a pass at answering like what is the relationship between like having a mentor and experiencing challenges, because I think like that could be a good data relationship for this question.
Sure. Daniel, could you go back to the mentor challenge slides, which would be in the hypothesis stuff? So I think we did find those who did not have mentor had more barriers. No, like go all the way to the top with the mentors, not just the newcomers.
Oh, you mean the
yeah.
Yeah.
No. Okay.
This one.
Yeah, 62% did not have mentors, so we remember that. Can you go down to the hypothesis? I think we had challenges and having a mentor as one of the hypotheses.
Yeah, so we go to the hypothesis.
Yeah, so I think those in minority face challenges, that would be in that. Can you go down?
Yeah, so.
Education. Yeah, so the last one would be having a mentor, so let's go to that slide.
Yeah, this is the language, this is gender, this is...
Oh, we didn't have it.
Oh, yeah, I remember why...
Okay, from what I remember, because I think we had way too many slides and we sort of dropped that, we can bring that back. I do remember that those who had mentors had just a slightly... So basically what's happening is there are people who said they face challenges and those who had mentors. And there was a difference. Those who had mentors faced less challenges, but the difference was not significant. There was not much difference. So one of the things we were thinking about, this was a little confusing data point that needs more qualitative data. What we were thinking, it might be there's no night and day difference. It might be that those who are really struggling are actually going and seeking mentors maybe. So that's why those with mentors also have problems and those without mentors have problems. That was intuitive, but the difference was not that big. So that was something I wanted to kind of find out more from the newcomers data and the mentors, is that having a mentor did not help out because it's confusing to maybe the mentors also, who knows? Or was it that those who were facing challenges went out and sought mentors? So I don't know.
I'm a bit surprised to hear that those who had mentors, that the mentors didn't help as much as expected.
But also you have to think about this is a lot of the data of the no challenges might be people who have been in the community for a long time. But yeah, this was surprising. I would think there was a big night and day difference, but we did not find that difference.
I would like to add.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to say I would like to add, Marvin, that precisely the point of Anita, like, and we have the same question that you have, right? Like, we want to see what is the impact of mentorship in newcomers and challenges. So this is one of the topics that we're trying to like dive deeper through the interviews. And that is why we are selecting interns and mentors to ask these questions and see whether these help them or not. And we also have the friction logs.
So, if I could offer a bit of a perspective from the administrative view, the ASF from a high level, it's not like there's an obvious tutorial which you go through or some obvious little course and that you get into. And so even figuring out what you need to do is difficult from the beginning. And trying to change that to simplify things was something which I took a great interest in during my active years and largely failed. It was extremely difficult to simplify the ASF from that perspective. And I think part of that is just that we didn't appreciate the level to which that baffled newcomers. And I think that that is a contributing factor towards that. And that is, in fact, a difficult thing to change. And it's a durable barrier. To speak a little bit to the idea that the mentors don't had less of an impact, one of the reasons I'm really surprised about that is that at least within the membership, so the people that are the voting members of the ASF, that small group of a few hundred people, it's it's commonly understood that if you go to the Apache Con and have the opportunity to just talk with a bunch of people over several days, that dramatically improves your ability to navigate within the ASF. And perhaps there's a thresholding effect, and the threshold is just farther away than we expect. But still there should be some effect where a mentor is able to contribute to get through some of the initial barriers. I mean, this is later in the process that I'm talking about, whereas the people that are participating at the mentor level, they have an indirect effect on the pipeline. But we want to really affect the pipeline and see that people are not lost at the very top of the funnel, because it seems like we could really do a much better. So how do we go about that? Is that by improving things later in the funnel to then improving the participation of the existing members, or is it by just assigning members to widen the number of people that we have to begin with?
Yes, I think like you are touching upon a few of the ideas and points that we have been discussing. For example, when we were defining the type of profiles that we wanted to interview, we also were interested in people who left, right? And Anita mentioned this. I think these are questions that we could get insights to from these people, right? Like if you will have, like, I think what you're saying is like mentorship comes in some sort of like a path that evolves, within the life of like a commuter, because you start as a contributor and mentors help with a set of challenges there. But as you move, retention, like mentorship also has an impact on retention, and it will be important to understand why and how, so we can promote those activities more, so people don't leave after a given time.
Yeah, these are interesting questions, and I think we need a little more analysis or thinking about where in the funnel mentors can help, which might be something we ask the questions to people who are long-term contributors to get their perspectives. Like just understanding ASF policies. I know from the open discussion, some of them had difficulty understanding the decision-making process of what someone is getting accepted or not. So, yeah.
All right. So with that, Anita, do you want to cut the recording?
Yeah, I'll cut the recording, but if Maril has another question, we can, but let me stop the recording as soon as I figure out that.
All right. I need to drop off, but I wanted to say thank you, everyone. Thank you, Marvin. Thank you, Meryl. If you have questions, we can continue the conversation on the DNI mailing list.